When you think of the most powerful companies in history, you probably think of today's tech giants. Their wealth rivals that of entire nations. Their influence reaches into our homes, our conversations, our lives. But what if I told you there was a company 400 years ago that makes Apple or Amazon look like a corner store? A company that didn't just lobby governments, it was the government. A company that didn't have security guards, it had a private army of 260,000 soldiers, a force that dwarfed the British Army of its day. A company that minted its own money, signed its own international treaties, and waged its own wars. This isn't a sci-fi movie. This is the story of the English East India Company. It's the story of how a small group of London merchants, chasing the money-soaked scent of exotic spices, accidentally built one of the most powerful corporate empires the world has ever seen. It's the story of how that company went rogue, conquered a subcontinent, and ruled over hundreds of millions of people. And most disturbingly, it's the story of how its ghost DNA still shapes our world today. Our story starts at the dawn of the 17th century. The year is 1600 and Europe is obsessed with spices. Nutmeg, cloves, pepper. These weren't just for flavor. They were the oil of their day, and the profits were astronomical. A single successful voyage could bring back returns of over 400%. For decades, this lucrative trade was dominated by Spain and Portugal. But when England pulled off a shocking victory against the Spanish Armada, a few ambitious London merchants saw an opening. On December 31st, 1600, Queen Elizabeth I was granted a royal charter to a brand new venture, the Governor and Company of Merchants of London, trading into the East Indies. It sounds impressive, but it was a massive gamble. This was a tiny private company going up against European superpowers. Their goal wasn't to conquer anything. It was just to get a piece of the action. They wanted to break the spice monopoly. Their first voyages were a nightmare. They lost ships to storms, crews to disease, and they got hammered by the competition, especially the incredibly powerful Dutch East India Company. In those early years, the company was just struggling to survive. They quickly figured out that the legendary Spice Islands were too well defended, so they pivoted. They turned their focus to the vast, complex, and incredibly rich Indian subcontinent. At first, they came as humble traders. They had to ask the powerful Mughal emperor for permission just to set up small trading posts, called factories, in coastal cities like Surat and Madras. They'd trade European gold and silver for Indian textiles, cotton and silk, that were hugely popular back home. For more than a century, that was the game. Trade, not territory. They were operating at the mercy of local rulers. They were guests, not masters. But the Mughal Empire, the dynasty that had ruled India for centuries, was starting to crumble. And in the chaos, the company saw an opportunity, not just to trade, but to take over. The real turning point came in the mid-1700s. The company was no longer just a business. It had become a political player with its own private army, which it used to protect its warehouses from European rivals and to meddle in local conflicts. And in Bengal, India's richest province, a man named Robert Clive was about to change the game forever. Clive was a ferociously ambitious and utterly ruthless company man. He looked at the political chaos in India and saw a business opportunity. The local ruler of Bengal, the Nawab Siraj-ud-Dowlah, was getting nervous about the company's growing military power and told them to stop building up their fort in Calcutta. The company refused, so the Nawab attacked and took the city. The company didn't respond by sending a diplomat. It sent an army, led by Robert Clive. But Clive knew he was massively outgunned. So he fell back on a different kind of corporate tactic, a hostile takeover, carried out with bribery and conspiracy. Clive secretly made a deal with one of the Nawab's top commanders, a general named Mir Jafar. The offer was simple. Betray your ruler, make sure your men don't fight in the upcoming battle, and we'll make you the new Nawab of Bengal. The stage was set for the Battle of Plassey on the 23rd of June, 1757. On paper, it looked like an impossible fight for the company. But when the battle started, a huge chunk of the Nawab's army, commanded by Mir Jafar, just stood there and did nothing. The betrayal was everything. A battle that should have been a massacre for the British turned into a minor skirmish. Clive won, Siraj-ud-Dowlah was hunted down and executed, and the company's puppet, Mir Jafar, was placed on the throne. Plassey was more than a military victory. It was the moment the East India Company morphed from a group of merchants into a sovereign power. It now effectively controlled Bengal and its vast tax revenues. Suddenly, the company didn't need to ship silver from Britain to buy Indian goods anymore. It could just use India's own tax money to pay for its trade, its armies, and its own expansion. It had created a self-financing machine for conquest. The corporation had tasted real power, and its appetite was about to become insatiable. The century after Plassey was the era of the Company Raj. This wasn't the British Empire, not yet. This was something new, corporate colonialism. The East India Company became what one British politician called a state in the disguise of a merchant. Its power was staggering. The company's private army grew to over 260,000 men, a force made up mostly of Indian soldiers called sepoys, led by British officers. With this army, it systematically conquered or controlled huge swathes of the subcontinent, fighting wars, signing treaties, and imposing its own laws on millions of people. This entire corporate state was managed from a single office building in London by a board of directors. But in India, it was a free-for-all of corruption. Company employees, nicknamed nabobs, made fortunes that were beyond belief. Robert Clive himself went back to Britain with a personal fortune estimated at $57 million in today's money. When Parliament questioned his methods, he shot back, "I stand astonished at my own moderation." This unrestrained greed had horrifying results. The company's obsession with profits led it to impose brutal land taxes that destroyed the lives of farmers. Its policies crushed local industries to make sure there was no competition for British products. Most horrifically, its rule led directly to famine. During the Great Bengal Famine of 1770, the company's aggressive tax collection and hoarding of rice made a bad situation catastrophic. An estimated 10 million people starved to death, a third of the entire population. This wasn't just poor management. It was the cold, hard logic of a corporation maximizing shareholder value, where human lives were just collateral damage. The company even became a narco-state. To pay for the massive amounts of Chinese tea that Britain was addicted to, it needed something the Chinese would buy. The answer was opium. The company grew it in India and smuggled it into China against the emperor's direct orders, creating a massive addiction crisis that would eventually spark the Opium Wars. A private company, started by a few guys hoping to sell some pepper, was now running a subcontinent, commanding one of the largest armies in the world and trafficking drugs on an industrial scale. It had become too big, too powerful, and too dangerous. Back in London, the British government could only watch with a mix of awe and terror. The monster they had created was now completely out of control. By the middle of the 19th century, the company's empire was a powder keg. Decades of exploitation, crippling taxes, and cultural disrespect had turned almost everyone in India against it. The final spark came from inside its own army. In 1857, the company introduced a new type of rifle, the Enfield. A rumor tore through the sepoy ranks. The paper cartridges for this new rifle, which had to be bitten open, were greased with pig and cow fat. This was deeply offensive to both Muslim and Hindu soldiers, and for them, it was the final insult. What started as a mutiny among soldiers on May 10, 1857, exploded into a full-blown revolution against company rule that spread across northern and central India. This was the Indian Rebellion of 1857, a brutal, widespread war for independence. For over a year, both sides committed terrible atrocities in a desperate fight for the future of India. In the end, while the rebellion was widespread, the rebels lacked a single, unified command or a clear plan for what to do if they won. The company, now with the full military support of the British government, was able to brutally crush the uprising. But the rebellion had shattered the myth of company control. It proved to London that a private, for-profit company could not be trusted to run an empire. Its greed and incompetence had sparked a war that cost countless lives and nearly lost Britain its entire foothold in Asia. The company was now a liability. The end came quickly. On August 2nd in 1858, the British Parliament passed the Government of India Act. This law stripped the East India Company of all its power. Its armies were transferred to the crown, and India was placed under the direct rule of the British government. The age of the corporate state was over. The age of the British Raj had begun. The company itself, now just a hollow shell, was quietly dissolved for good in 1874. The story of the East India Company is a chilling look at what happens when corporate power goes completely unchecked. If you find these hidden histories as fascinating as we do, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell. And let us know in the comments, what modern company story reminds you the most of the East India Company? So why does a 400-year-old dead corporation still matter? Because its ghost DNA is all around us. The East India Company created the blueprint for the modern multinational. It was the first major company to sell shares to the public to fund its expansion. It pioneered corporate lobbying, using its vast wealth to buy influence in parliament. And it was maybe the very first company to become too big to fail, forcing the British government to bail it out in the 1770s to keep it from collapsing under its own debt. Its legacy is dark and complex. It was the engine of empire that paved the way for British rule in India. Its actions redrew the map of the world, started wars, and forever changed global trade. The very idea that a corporation can have legal rights, that it can exist as a legal person, was shaped by the company's long, bloody history. Today, when we debate the power of big tech, the role of corporate money in politics, and the responsibilities of global companies, we are living in the shadow of the East India Company. Its story is the original, stark warning of what happens when the pursuit of profit is separated from human decency, and when a corporation becomes more powerful than the country that created it. It's the cautionary tale of a company that didn't just change the world. For a time, it conquered it.